Ira Elliot, whose name reminds me of a bass snare rhythm, which may be appropriate for the
Nice.
creator of Beautiful Beats that joins us for a special conversation
How
today.
did I never think that?
The things I can add to your life is really what this is about.
Nathan,
From the
thank
90s to now, while daily life has been full of high lows, Not a Surf has buoyantly boasted a brilliance few bands could compete with, featuring a myriad of melodic memories that carry fans through the moments of their lives with immense connection and appreciation. Ira Elliot, accomplished musician and performer, thank you for joining us today.
you. Thank you, Danny, for having me. It's very
Yeah.
kind of you.
Hey,
Thank you very much. Beautiful intro. Thank you. I
it's the
feel
least
appreciated. I
it's the
love that.
least I can do. And you're like, all right, well, thank you. See you next time. Appreciate it. You just wrapped a pretty big tour and have plans for Europe in 2022. So, Ira, what was the tour like? And maybe share some of the high points with us.
Well, the tour was really interesting. It was really interesting for a number of reasons. The first one was that because of the pandemic, we haven't toured for a year and a half. And so the first was this not anxiety, but this sort of anticipation about like, what are we getting into? Because we knew going in, it was going to be unusual. Like, I've been like in all of us have been touring musicians now for getting on 25 years. So for us, going in a tour bus and touring around is like super mundane. It's like, oh, what big deal? Doesn't everyone do that all the time?
Mm-hmm.
So we're kind of, I know I am kind of blasé about it. It's typical behavior. But we knew going in, talking to our manager and our tour manager about the hoops we'd have to jump through this time was going to be a little more difficult. So we weren't, for example, the main problem was that like half the thing we do once show is over, we go back and let's talk to everybody. We go out to, Matthew will go out to the merch table and we'll go out and meet I get to meet relatives and friends I don't see for a year and a half, 2 years. It's one of the, it's a social event. It's not just on stage. Thank you, everybody. Good night. There's a community and there's an interaction. We knew that this time we really couldn't do that for like safety's sake. If anyone got sick, if any one of us got sick, in the band, that was it. Like if I got sick in Philly and a couple of days later I had a fever, like we couldn't call a guy in, at the last minute. Actually, and that's the other part of the story. So the first was the knowing that the tour was going to be weird, which was really in the long run wasn't too bad. We had to sort of just like make an announcement from the stage and whatever. Sorry, we can't do this next time. But the other thing was, in fact, our bassist Daniel. Who, we were just with him a few months ago. We were at he lives in Spain, and we were at his house in Spain, rehearsing new stuff, recording new ideas. Matthew, I think, mentioned it in his thing. He had this big, long, hours of recordings that we had done.
Right.
And so no sooner had we all left the island to go home and do stuff, Daniel went on vacation and promptly injured himself so badly he couldn't play the bass and was unable to walk or anything like this. So 2 weeks before the tour started, we had to suddenly found ourselves without a bassist. So we had to get our friend Ed Velasquez, who is a bass player in a band called the fantastic band from Boston called the Gravel Pit, one of the first bands we ever went on tour with back in '96. So his name came up. And that gave me a lot of anxiety, like not having to go on the road with some other guy. Not that I didn't know him, but like, it's another, like, maybe what happens if what if he's not a good bass player with us? What if, there's a lot of what ifs.
Yeah.
Well, it turned out in the long run that Ed, of course, was a fantastic bass player, played the stuff beautifully and made us sound great. And we had, like, musically speaking, it was great. We worked out beautifully. So the 2 weeks went, 2.5 weeks was like 17 or odd shows. I think one show got canceled in Canada because of whatever size restrictions. But all in all, the tour went beautifully. The audiences loved it. The bands sounded very, very good. Ed was a real hilariously funny guy. So we had a great time. So I didn't miss Daniel. It was great.
So we sent him a text message when it was over and said, we're thinking about you.
But... We'll be calling you. Thanks.
Yeah.
No. It was a hard situation early on, and we picked the right guy to come in. So in the long run, it worked out beautifully, and we all had a great time, and the band sounded very good. And Ed was very responsive. Every day I woke up and he was already sitting there with like headphones on and a bass, going through the part. So it went really beautiful.
What's interesting is that this time around, we were able to follow every announcement on Instagram, and we could see when shows were moved and when you went to different countries, what all the restrictions were like. And it seems like a night to night, so many questions that were up in the air.
Yeah.
I was at the show in San Francisco the third night of the tour before everything shut down. Then the
Oh,
next weekend, I saw
January.
Guster in San Francisco, and they did an improv show, and then their tour was shut down. And it
We
was
saw
such a
Ryan. By the way, we saw Ryan Miller in. We saw Ryan in where he lives in. He's in Massachusetts or whatever. Right? He's in.
yeah, absolutely.
Can't think of what
Vermont or
Vermont. He's in Vermont. Yeah, sorry, Vermont.
They're up in the Northeast.
Anyway, we had dinner with Ryan. Anyway, please continue.
Well, it's funny because I owe Discovering Youth to them, because about a decade ago, you played a show in Berkeley at a really strange venue. Like it felt like a high school gymnasium. And to the point where Guster came on stage and said, Professor Pisapia is going to talk everybody down here in this lecture hall. And the mix was actually, for both of you, was really bad. Like the wall resounding inside. You couldn't hear a thing. Like when you came out, I didn't know who you guys were. And this was my point of discovery. It was so loud to the like threshold of feeling happening. And I was like, I'm not sure what they're doing. Like, I'm just not sure what's happening. But when you hit Inside of Love, the volume came down, like everything came down. And maybe it's the flanger and the whole levels. And people started dancing, and they were going side to side and swaying. And I was like, whoa, whoa. And I turned to my wife. I'm like, this is a beautiful song. We need to like dig into this band when we get back. And so I got in late. And then that was an interesting thing, because with the internet, now I'm on YouTube and I'm watching all the KEXP sessions, and I'm thinking, you guys have, in my opinion, the best selection of extended live sets that I've ever seen with those 5. They're so beautiful, whether it's acoustic or electric.
Stuff is always beautifully shot.
Oh my gosh.
One of my favorite stuff to do.
The multi-camera, the way it's mixed, you seem very connected to each other. How do you approach different sessions, whether you're going acoustic or electric? Because I have, how do you approach them? How do you look forward to each? What's your process like?
Like everything, being a musician is like, I came from an actor's background, and actors have, like, if you're in a play, you read the same script every night. You're saying the same words. You know what the guy is going to say. When the gun goes off. Everything about it, technically speaking. But you work in the moment. Like I deliver my first line, you respond to it. That's what music should be like. Like it's a response. It's made fresh in the moment. So Matthew starts, I respond. Like if Matthew starts a little fast, I'm a little fast. If Matthew's a little slow, I'm a little slow. Like, it's a live, it's like baking bread. It's like right there live in front of you. So every time you play these songs, because you're in a different place, because you're in a different room, because you're with a different group of people watching, it's always new again. You're in a different room. Like you don't know who's in that room. Like, maybe you see a bunch of people down front that you recognize, for bands like us who've been around for so long, there's always like, sometimes you see this core of people, a couple of smiley faces up front, really well. And then everyone else, you have to think like, I have to imagine that everyone in this room, like the majority of them have never seen us before. The overwhelming majority will never see us again. Like they'll have one chance, maybe. And I saw Not a Surf at this weird thing at the place.
Yeah.
They were really good. That's all I want. I want the guy at the back of the room who happened to wander in. Like, what is going on here? I got a 15 minutes to go, hey, these guys are pretty good. Like, that's what I want. Like the people who know us, doesn't matter. Like every room is completely different, completely new. And so your head's down, like, you set up the box, you put, like acoustically, I play the cajon, which is a little sort of wooden box. It's the same thing. You have to like imagine that you're just doing it for the first time, and like it's never been done before, and like I don't know, it's a totally in the moment thing. So that's what you do.
Yeah, I love that feeling. I played a vineyard over here in Brentwood a couple weeks ago, and everyone is new to me who's seeing me, because it's not a venue where they've come to see me as an artist. They've come to enjoy some music and some drinks, and that's such a cool opportunity that you really try to sell those songs hard, and you try to get in those emotions of those creations.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting story. I want to tell you an interesting story about the early days of Not a Surf.
Yeah.
When we first started out in New York playing shows, we played a handful of shows, and because we're like every other band, the only people that came to the shows were our friends. Like, you invite your friends, hey, we're playing a show at this little tiny place.
Yep.
and your 15 friends show up. And then you play another show a couple of weeks later and you invite these same 15 friends. And we knew, because we played a handful of shows. First of all, the first thing was that we knew we were doing all right because these same 15 friends kept showing up. If they show up to the second and the third and the fourth show, you know you got something, because your friends will show up to show one and maybe show two. And after that, they got to walk the dog, they got kids, they got to go to the dentist. So felt a good thing. But I think one of the main things that happened to us, it was a very Zen lesson we got really early on. We were playing small shows in small rooms around New York City. And what happened to us over a very short period of time, within less than 10 shows played, we were signed to Elektra Records and making a record with Rick Ocasek. It was very weird. And I think part of the energy that happened was that none of us were really concerned about the audience and what they thought. We were so involved in, like, we loved the songs and making them so much that when we started playing them, we were literally transported by the songs themselves. Well, Matthew had written a bunch of great songs, let's put it that way. But the songs were so good and we were so excited to play them together. Like, we were always playing together. We weren't playing out to the audience. We were playing in to us because we were just lighting each other up. And when an audience sees a band who are completely like in the moment and are enjoying it together, not like communicating it out to the audience. In acting, they call it indicating. Like, I'm so happy. Like, when you're genuinely happy and not pretending to be happy, that draws people in. People are like, oh, here's a bunch of guys pretending to be happy. But if you see people who are like genuinely like being transported with what they're doing in the moment, that's compelling. The people can't take their eyes off it. And I think that's what was happening with us, was like the audience was generally small, but we were so like in a fog of like, oh my God, this is so great, that I felt it was we couldn't lose. And it turned around really fast for us. That's my favorite Zen, not a surf story.
Oh, that's super
Worry about
rad.
the damn audience. Worry about yourself.
No, that's right.
They'll come along with you. They'll come along. If you're having a great time, the audience will come right along.
Yeah, they'll feel that. That energy definitely translates.
The musicians feel it. The audiences will feel it.
Yeah. The Sunday that was that January 17th Great American Music Hall show, I had a huge migraine. It was the first week I started working 2 full-time jobs. So I was teaching high school and working for NBA 2K doing voiceovers. And that was the biggest thing I'd landed to, that, doing a high school commentary in 2K21 and then working there full time. And my bass player and my buddy Joshua Colley says, you're not going to the show. He comes by, you can't even speak. You're sitting here with your eyes closed and you turned the TV off and I'm watching you sit still. You're not going to make it. And I'm like, no, you got to drive my car and we got to go. We got to get to the city. And it meant so much to me because Matthew had responded to some emails and I was working on the song All at Once. And he helped me give me notes on the song, like maybe a little more of this. What does this mean? Do you think that's worth keeping? And I was so moved by the graciousness that he took to send me those emails while you guys were busy getting ready for things. And, I just was so touched. I'm not going. I have to go. And we got to get there early so we can get to the front. So I wore the shirt with the All at Once logo on it. And I said to him when he came out, thank you so much, and I pointed and he's like, hey, Danny, thank you for coming, man. And when you started playing, instead of the migraine potentially getting much worse by amplified sound and lights all over the place, it cleared up, man. And you hit Friend Hospital so brilliantly that I was like almost crying. And it is so awesome. So I thank you for that day of mind clearing.
You're quite welcome. You're quite welcome.
But more than that, I think I'm so grateful to Guster that I discovered you. I feel like you've been on ever since then, been on like my musical Mount Rushmore with Guster, with Green Day, with Toad the Wet Sprocket, and then depending on which day, Gin Blossom's Oasis Tonic.
Oh wow!
I'm just
really great. Thank you for putting us in that pantheon. Those are beautiful. Those are great bands.
And I just think there's so many moods that you get to so brilliantly in your music that it's helped me through every day of teaching in this room when students were online, but in my classroom too. 3 out of 5 days of the week, there's a Not a Surf song coming in when they walk into the room. And yesterday a kid goes, what song is this in African American studies? And the kid's like, what song is, and it was 80 Windows. He goes, I'm getting that. I'm going to get that today. And I just think it's neat that it can connect so many people. And I just wonder.
Well, I think that's the beauty of Matthew's work, is that there's a simple beauty about his lyricism that he really gets to the heart of a matter. Yeah, I've been right next to him for 25 years. I don't know how he does it, but
Yeah.
that's his gift, like to sort of to boil things down and to simply but poetically, not overly poetically, like there's this line where it could be florid, but he really gets to it, emotions in a way that like really kind of stop you dead, like in a word or two. It's really he's one of the best,
Yeah,
if
it's
not
pretty
the best.
amazing, and you've worked with hundreds of bands. So, how have your experiences shaped you? Yeah. How have working with different musicians changed you, shaped you, inspired
Yeah.
you, given you extra tools in the toolkit? How does that work for you?
Well, everything, I'm a drummer. So drummers come from a slightly different planet than everybody else, I think. But I was lucky that I grew up in New York City. I started playing drums when I was like 10 in like 1973 or something. So by the time I became a teenager, it was like the late 70s in New York, and there was a big music scene. And as a drummer, I had become I I was pretty good. I wasn't bad. I was pretty good. And so immediately, if you're like halfway good and you're a drummer, like people start asking, "Hey, I need a drummer for this," and you join one thing and people see you, and then it snowballs, and like people see you in one band, like, "Oh, this guy's good." And I mean, that's how I met Nana Surf. Obviously, I met them in 1983 or four.
Hmm.
I had joined my first serious band, who were a garage band in New York, and Daniel was a big fan. Matthew was a fan. They were garage rock guys, and so that started the relationship. And it was like whatever 10 years later, 19 no to 89, yeah, 10 years went by before I got a call from Matthew, even though I saw them. But anyway, like I started playing in this. I started Actually, I started in a rockabilly band, and then I was poached out of the rockabilly band by the bass player into the 60s garage band, and then so I want basically, like I said yes to everything, and I was in goth bands. I was in police style cover bands. I was in all kinds of things. I can't even remember half of them. Sort of slow motion stoner rock bands. I was in everything. So as a drummer, I never said no, and it was a constant. Like everything you do, it brings it adds to your skill set. Every time you perform in front of an audience, you get a little more confident. I'm still getting it. Like I'm still having experiences. Like on this tour, I had a couple of experiences. Again, these sort of deep, transcendent. It sounds crazy, but after playing the same instrument for now, I'm closing it on 60 now. So it's been like 40 years, 45, 47 years of playing the drums, and still I'm able to, you never stop learning, and you never stop. You have to keep monitoring yourself. I keep finding new stuff. On tour this last week, I was playing and I'm like, I'm just monitoring my body. I'm like, something's wrong, like I'm not doing it right. I've been doing it a long time, still not doing it right. And I just found like some residual tension. I use these two hands and my right leg like predominantly, because I'm self-taught. And my left leg, which kind of works the hi-hat a little bit, has a little time on its own. And sometimes it hangs out by itself. And what it turned out was that all my energy was sort of flowing
Oh,
into all my unused energy,
yeah,
all this
yeah.
nervous energy was all accumulating in the ball of my left foot. And
Up
I'm
and down
playing
there.
a beat,
Yeah.
maybe I'm playing Inside of Love at Soundcheck, which is very relaxed. It's a very tick-tock,
Mhm.
move back and forth. And yet, so I'm playing this and I'm like, oh, I feel great, but something's wrong. And I made myself really quiet, and I listened. I just felt my whole body out. I'm like, oh, what's all this? It's down there. All this other energy, this nervous energy has all gone down into my leg, and it's all, my foot is like on the pedal, like beep, 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 beep. I could feel it. I'm like, well, I've got to make that go away. And as soon as I made it sort of like, I mentally like removed it, I let it flow out. Everything changed completely. My whole mindset was like a veil had been lifted,
Hmm.
and this inner calm allowed me to hear everything better and like play it better and like relax into it. My brain and my body connected perfectly. If there's no, once you remove any kind of nervous energy, or you're in control of the nervous energy, your ability to sort of be clear about what you're doing in the moment becomes amplified. So I
Hmm.
keep learning new stuff all the time. It never stops.
It sounds like something I read that you said in an interview, where to not make yourself nuts by working too hard and overthinking things, which is huge
Absolutely.
in my music. Like you also said in the interview that that 9 tracks was good for So Much Love. And the companion app is available now. Everyone go check it out and go pick up the LPs and go to the store. And it's funny because when I made All at Once, because I'm paying for my own releases and I don't have any label support, I put 29 tracks on there. And I wrote then another album in June because I'm at home all the time in this room with all these guitars. And I'm like, what am I not going to do? You know, I got school's over at 1. Let's write some more, you know, and every day was very creative. But I was going to ask you something about, you know, Matthew seems like more of a perfectionist in some aspects, and maybe the middle ground is the magic for you guys as far as like creating goes.
There's 2 things that happen. You have your creative brain, and then you have your logical brain. So your creative brain should be kind of off the leash, you know, like let it go, let it flow around, and then bring your author brain, your editor brain in later and go, oh, like Matthew was saying, like, does this need to be here, this element? And then you have to kind of be really meticulous and go through everything. Matthew's the kind of guy, for example, when we start to practice anything, new, old, he puts on his guitar, we get at the microphones, you know, we set up with a PA or whatever, and we start to play. And never once in the entire 85 years, Not a Surf has been together, never once has Matthew just put on the guitar and played the song on the guitar while we played through a song. He plays the guitar and sings it every time, even if it's a brand new song. He plays and sings at the same time. He sings the whole song through. Like if I'd be lazy, I'm like, well, let's just play this song, make sure we know it. I'll just play the guitar. I don't want to blow my voice out. We're meticulous about like getting it right. I think as a singer guitarist who, you know, he does a lot of complicated stuff. I think it's a constant reassertion of like, okay, what am I doing and how do I get it to match up with the lyric, you know, like there's a lot of coordination and probably a lot more coordination in what Matthew's doing than what I'm doing, which is really easy for me. He's got to sing, play the guitar in his weird ball way, which is completely unbelievable. And like, you know, whatever, step on a bunch of pedals and stuff like that. That's a hard job. Playing the drums is easy. That's like, I wish I could show you, like I have a studio too, like right behind me. I installed a shed in my house. Maybe we'll get there later if you want to see it. I'll try to get out.
Beautiful. Since we're now into like the phasing and recording process, the Beatles Get Back came out on Disney Plus. I assume you're all the way through, right? And that
I'm through once, and I'm about to start a second round through. Yeah.
And what are you looking for in the second run through?
I'm just looking for anything that I missed the first time. I think I'm definitely going to put like subtitles on because they talk fast. There's a lot of stuff going on, and I have a lot of reference material. A lot of the stuff I've been reading. And I take it in the other night. Excuse me, 1 second. You know, I have you know the book, which is
fantastic.
And I have another book. It's out of print called it's called Drugs, Divorce, and a Slipping Image, which was a book written in 19. It was from 90. When was this published? In the 90s, I think 94. And it basically is the transcript, all the day by day. It's the Beatles Get Back giant coffee table book is sort of excerpted. They have a lot of the dialogue of what was going on day by day. But of course they were there, you know, like 8 hours a day for 28 days or something like that, or 30 to 20 days altogether or something. So there's a lot that went on. And this book sort of has these 2 guys went through all the Nagra tapes, all the you know, the film recorder Nagra reels, and they transcribed everything that was going on and commented on everything that was going on minute by minute all day. So if you really want to get down to the brass nails, of course, there's still a lot in the documentary that you know is not in there that they couldn't possibly
like
put
90%, right?
You know, things like, you know, things that Yoko Ono was probably a lot more vocal in the movie. She seems kind of quiet and laid back. I guarantee you, Yoko was not like quiet and the whole time. She was in there with John shoulder to shoulder. So I think, you know, what you're seeing is a masterful piece of editing where he's got the story down to like a director. Like this is the story he wants to tell. The Beatles, he didn't want to get too much of George Martin. He didn't want to get too much of Yoko Ono. He didn't want to get, you know, I'm sure Linda had something to say too. They were all artists.
Right.
So I want to try to go through and really dig down into like what they're saying day by day, because there's a couple of things. The flower pot conversation, I gotta go back to that again.
Oh my gosh, so much nuance, especially when they're acting like the cameras aren't there, but they know the cameras are there, and in those moments you think you're really seeing behind a veil.
Yeah.
What stuck with me were a few things, and I loved every moment of it. It made my weekend watching it. And then I would come in here and think, what can I apply that I just heard? What can I do differently? Like when they were doing Two of Us and they didn't have a bass. I'm like, well, let me do a song without a bass today. And let me see what that sounds like. And when Paul is sitting and John has not come in and George has gone home and he's choking back tears, that's maybe the most dynamic thing I've ever seen on film in any production, cinematic or documentary or otherwise. And I feel so heartbroken watching this relationship slip.
Yeah.
And he feels he can't do anything about it. And the question was a simple one, like, well, what if you put a little pressure on him? But of course he thought about that already. Like he's thinking through all scenarios. What was your response to seeing that? And what were you thinking about?
I was thinking about all that stuff too. This weird, we let it get back / let it be comes with a lot of baggage. We know it's about the breakup of the Beatles. Is it, were they breaking up? Were they not breaking up? The movie gives a lot of mixed messages about where they were. They're constantly talking about divorce and breaking up. It's time for a divorce. Yeah. And then George is walking out like, after, like Paul, I'm trying to parse their behavior. Like I always thought it was Paul. I'm trying to figure out in the famous sequence between Paul and George, where George says, I'll play, something or nothing, if whatever pleases you, I'll do it.
Yeah.
That sequence is legendary with Beatle people. It's that phrase, like, what are we seeing there? Are we seeing George? Are we seeing Paul being bossy? Are we seeing George? Like we know George was unhappy because he had come from the band and this sort of good vibe that they had into what he called the winter of our discontent. They were basically unhappy and had been basically unhappy since the death of Epstein, and they were kind of rudderless, right? So Paul had taken over as the boss, which he didn't like being. Right. He admits as much through the whole thing, like
multiple times.
I didn't want to be the boss. I don't like being the boss, but he is the most. I guess of the four of them, he's the most A type, right? He's the most structured. Like, come on, boys, let's work. Let's do the work. And they're the most like, give us a break. So there's that conflict, which is kind of fascinating. At the same time, I believe now, after reading a bunch of commentary about it, the reason George walked out was not because of anything Paul had said, because of something that he got into with John, which is unclear. Yes. So I don't know what that was about. Like what, because you figure George and John's relationship is pretty good. But even so, George was the distant cousin. You were going to say?
There's a moment where Paul's out of the room and John goes to George. So, now I'd like to learn one of your songs and let's do that. And they got right to it. And I'm like, well, why didn't this happen when they were all together? There seems like Paul's the only one with his foot ever on the accelerator to get to the next moment.
And the other comment I read yesterday was that, I want to go back and watch this moment again. He goes, as soon as George is out, John lightens right up.
Yeah.
As soon as George goes out, like suddenly John is like, hey, let's have fun and have a good time.
The weight's lifted somehow.
Yeah, so I think maybe John is really feeling this kind of discontent from George, and it's putting the dampers on him. The dynamic is really fascinating between these four guys that we feel we know so well.
Yes.
We're watching them behave, even though, yes, they're on camera, but they are, in the long run, after hours and hours of the cameras just being around, they're really just behaving, they become, cameras quickly float into the background when you're just like working, rehearsing, you're having interactions. They become, they disappear after a while. So I think we're seeing a lot of really honest behavior and not like, Paul obviously at one point goes, I can't do this in front of the cameras. I can't go into George, with the cameras running, famously. But the internal workings are really, really laid out in a way that you never, as a Beatle fan, really get to see in action, especially at the later period.
Of any band of significance, you get cut, public relations approved, edited for everyone looks good behavior. And to see the top artists with so much creative juice left, it frustrated me so much to see George Martin and producers come in and out and do nothing to prompt anything really, other than feed into their yes mentality of like, oh yeah, maybe this is a garbage space. Let's move. Oh yeah, well maybe let's do. You can't just that wasn't getting them anywhere else. Paul's saying, give me structure. We need structure. And nobody involved seems to be wanting to do it. Or maybe they feel they can't.
Well, at one time they say, yeah, but on the other hand, they're also going, hey, let's take a boat to Tripoli.
Yeah,
whatever you guys want. They're the Beatles. So literally the bottom line of what they do is You want to move? We'll move. You want a different place? We'll go to a different place. Like money is no object. Everyone's ready to rent a boat. The QE2.
Across the ocean.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, anything is possible. So they're all facilitating whatever the Beatles want. The problem with the Beatles is, at this point in their career, they have achieved everything they wanted. They made movies. They toured the world. They don't want to tour anymore.
Right.
They only want to make records. They made all the greatest records. They made the fucking White Album. They made goddamn Sgt. Pepper. They were on like what was left for them to do? I think they were just ran out of stuff to compel them to be a band anymore. They had hit all the apex. They had played the biggest concerts. They played the Shea Stadium. Like no one had done stuff like that. They'd run out of challenges, and I think they were just like, I think they hit a wall with each other. Like we want to do something else completely, and that turned out to be like have solo careers. Unfortunately, the way they did it somehow precluded the fact, like that's the great tragedy, is that they couldn't have made a couple of solo records and then got back together by 75. It would have been, they could have easily done that, but
right. And Ringo and Paul have talked about how they liked the documentary because it showed them more playful and fun, and there's a lot of goofiness, the singing through the teeth, the boyish playing and all that. And I see that.
Yeah.
But I come away with it more saddened that Paul is still churning out Let It Be and Long and Winding Road. And why isn't the beauty of that art enough for everyone to put the ego aside or put whatever hindrances aside and come back together strong? And I think it's all the things you said, but I'm sitting there like heartbroken watching it because I think of what more could have been. And then I guess maybe that's a problem with fandom too. Maybe, that you're always wanting more and you're always wanting more of the same. And then and that's maybe selfish of us, and maybe you've experienced that too, and I know you've talked and Matthew talked about it. It's got to be what the band is becoming and not the band what was,
Right.
And it keeps getting better. Your music keeps getting better in a beautiful way. It makes me happy to say.
The Beatles had a particular interesting trajectory, unlike Not a Surf trajectory, which Not a Surf trajectory is very, I think in a way, not in a negative way, but like we don't really change. That's one thing about us, is that the Beatles were constantly changing. They were making two full albums every year. They were constantly looking to never do the same thing twice. That was their whole trajectory. Like, we did that, let's not do that again. We did this, like, we made Rubber Soul and Revolver.
Yep.
We're pretty close to being almost the same kind of record, almost, in terms of the technology and the sort of sound structure. And then from there, it was like Pepper and on and on and on. Like, they all were really fascinating. Not a Surfer makes its bones by like being super consistent. Like, we play a different game. So for us, there's a consistency about it. We don't think too hard about certain things like, how can we make it completely different? Like, we work in a comfort zone. And so, because when the three of us or the four of us are together, it's just comfort. You play whatever you play. We'll we work together to make everything work. Here, I could see a number of different things happening where I think they were all individuating, and like, I think they've been through so much. And yeah, they immediately lapse back. They know how to deal with each other because they all have a great sense of humor. So they're all able to sort of make a tense situation better by being funny or dancing around, or genuinely having a good time, not fake having a good time, but they know how to deal with each other. But again, you have the influence, the John Yoko thing to me really blows my mind, in that not only did he start a new relationship, totally entitled to do that, unhappy with his first relationship, but now he finds this woman who just lights him up, right? Yeah. She's an artist. She's a serious avant-garde artist. She lives like an artist. Like, that's what I want. I don't want this middle class at home, with the wife and the kids. Like, I'm not one of those people. Right. I want an artist life. And so he finds someone who knows how to have an artist's life. And there she is. So you can see it. They're so in love with each other. They're so like together. It's kind of adorable. At the same time, what band ever, like, the lead singer, guitarist, like, I'm going to have my wife with me 24/365.
Shoulder to shoulder.
Like, where did he get that idea? Like, all day long. Like, where did he get that idea? And did he know that it was going to be a kind of a cudgel between him and the Beatles? I think he must have known that. And I think he's like, well, that's just the way it's going to be, guys. Like, you want me, you got to deal with her too. And you know what? For the most part, they kind of did it. I mean, they were clearly unhappy. They made jokes about it. Like,
from what we see as well.
Paul makes that incredible prescient joke Like 50 years from now, people will be like, oh, they broke up because Yoko sat on an amp.
He
Like
sees it.
that's an incredibly prescient thing for him to have said,
Yes.
because that's kind of in fact what happened.
He saw it.
She ate George's biscuit off the amp, and everyone's like, "Oh, Yoko Ono broke up the Beatles." She's an easy demon to put it on. But John was definitely using her. I mean, listen, I think there was also some drug stuff happening too. I think there was an early part of there. I don't know if you. I'm trying to. You can't really see it too much, in other than the fact that John is very, very quiet.
I see low energy. I don't hear a lot of the time. There's so much silence.
Yeah, I was amazed that Paul, like there's a sequence where we start to play early on, they start to play Don't Let Me Down,
Okay.
which is this like heart-wrenching, beautiful song from him to Yoko. I'm in love for the first time. It's very basic. I'm in love for the first time. Don't you know it's going to last? It's a love that's lasts forever. It's a love that has no past. It's so baldly romantic.
Straightforward.
It breaks your heart. So just the words alone. But here's Paul McCartney, who's clearly on fire. Like we said, like he's writing some of his best material.
He's on a streak. Yep.
And immediately he picks up like, "Hey George, let's do this whole I'm in love." They start to do all these like background harmonies on his song. They start to sort of he starts to wedge in harmonized response harmonies, which, knowing the song as we do now in the future, we know like that doesn't cut it.
Doesn't
like,
work.
Why are you doing that, Paul McCartney? That's an awful idea. Like that. And then he has this argument with George about what's more or less corny about it. Like that, and the fact that John sort of sat there and like kind of let them do it. Like, didn't John think like that's not working in my song at all? Like I would have thought like John would have been like, I don't know about that idea. Can we? I don't know. In Not a Surf, we that's the way we operate. If someone has an idea, if Daniel has something idea, hey, let's try this. It's never like, no, that's a terrible idea. Even though you may know in your head it's a terrible idea. We go through the process. We're like, well, let's try it out and see if we can get it to work. And
like
maybe
improv, like yes and.
Yeah, if someone has an idea in the band, you that's the part of a band. Like you don't humor them, you indulge them. Like
that's good. Yeah.
Okay, well, let's try it. I mean, I think that's a terrible idea, but hey, let's do it. And sometimes, like, if you, as a drummer, I know, like, if I think something's a terrible idea, you can sabotage it by executing it poorly. Like, see, I told you that wouldn't work.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, but you played it wrong. So yeah, there's all that kind of stuff. But
love that.
But I see them doing that. But maybe that's what it was. Like John just going, well, if it works, we'll know it, and if it doesn't work, we'll know it too. And I think the Beatles knew that too. Mm-hmm. Like.
It'll work itself out.
You work it, and then you listen to it back. And if it's too busy and too distracting, you dump it. And I'm sure the Beatles did that their entire career.
You used the word wedge. He drew a wedge in, and that's what the film feels like. You've got them in a circular formation, looking at each other, and there's wedges.
When they set up the first day.
Yeah,
I noticed this for the other. I was watching it for a few minutes.
Yeah,
and when they set up the first day in Twickenham, it's set up like a stage.
Mm-hmm.
They put the drums on a riser and they put the amps facing forward, as if the Beatles were going to stand there facing the cameras rehearsing. Yeah. And what's the first thing they do? They sit their chairs down in front of Ringo in a circle, and they play in a circle. Right. That to me was fascinating, because they were immediately pushing them to do this performance thing, and they're like, "No, we're here to rehearse."
Yeah.
So they sat in this tight little circle, and that was what's interesting about it. Them face to face. That's what I really liked about it. That sort of like they were just going to be intimate and work in this little thing. They weren't going to do this performance.
I think I expected it to be more tumultuous throughout, and I kept waiting for this big moment, but I think it's little things in it. I felt like for George Harrison, who then presents a song, and that's when I felt, maybe the only time I felt Paul was being mean, like cold and not accepting. And he's showing Lennon, and Paul's making jokes, or oh yeah, that's going to work. Meanwhile, a lot of the songs on the album are nonsensical in their lyrics. So why was it when George presents a concept like that? Oh, no, we couldn't even consider. You don't. And then they ask him questions like, oh, do you have it all worked out? Do you even know what we're going to play on this? Yeah. It seemed really unfair.
Completely other. And John does the same thing too. Like George comes in with, oh, I wrote this song last night, I Me Mine, which is, I mean, obviously a great fucking song. Though he hadn't worked it out. The original version of I Me Mine, there's the waltz part, all through the day, I Me Mine. And instead of the wonderful where they go to the shuffle, they hadn't worked that out yet. And so George plays this little Spanish. That was the inter part, which is not a strong part. So I think they had that early on, but yeah, the same thing. Like Paul hadn't worked out everything. Do you know what you were going to do? Like, I think it was just an extension of the Lennon McCartney songwriting team philosophy, whereby like it's our stuff and George gets one, maybe two.
Yeah.
And George's stuff was, listen, George was writing stuff that was really painful for them to have to listen to. He was writing "I Me Mine" and what was the other one? All Things Must Pass. Like the Beatles didn't want to hear that shit.
Yeah,
like
that's not what they're looking for.
Sad, somber song about the death of that was too spot on. I think for them, they're like, this song is way too fucking painful for us to play over and over and over and over. Like, ouch.
Yeah,
I don't want to hear All Things Must Pass, even though they were on the verge of breaking up. I don't think they wanted to hear that.
Ironically, the one person we've not talked about here is Ringo, who I know you're an immense fan of, and I love all his work and the way he styles and the way he adds so much and much the way I feel like you do to the songs, and know what's right and play what's needed and serve the song. What are your thoughts on Ringo through this thing, which we hear very little from him?
I saw a friend of mine sent me something yesterday. I want to see if I can find it because it's about Ringo. I'll tell you about my Beatles cover band in a minute.
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm in a Beatles cover band with a couple of guys. One of them is Doug Gillard from Dying by Voices, and my friend Eric Paparosi, who plays in Cat Power, among other things.
Awesome. Yep.
And my friend Mark Rozzo, who we played a number of bands together, Maplewood and Champale. And where is this comment about Ringo? Give me 1 second if I can find it. Oh, gosh darn it! Come on. It was here. This is a quote. This was from the where was this from? In the Atlantic. I'll read you this one paragraph. You find yourself thinking a lot about Ringo during Get Back because he's the quietest, the stillest, and the most camera aware. His face, his melancholy deadpan, is a permanent reaction shot. The other three are in a huddle, eye to eye, fur to fur, at ground level, but Ringo's up on his drum riser, arms loose, in desolate repose, his characteristic rubbery slouch. Mm-hmm. He's waiting for something he can drum along to. Then out of nowhere, it happens. His perfected, ponderous groove, the leaden splash of his hi-hat, his beautiful shapely/shapeless fills, and the mysterious swing. And then it stops. And once again, he's watching, waiting, dolefully droll. It occurs to you that while John, Paul, and George are artists at work, Ringo is a work of art. And you begin to understand his Ringoisms, his absurdist inversions, his Heraclitean fragments, I don't even know what that means, and as little bulletins from a unique condition, the condition of being Ringo. So I love Ringo more than I love breathing the air. Like Ringo is so alpha and omega to me. I can't even, and the longer I live, the more I realize how central Ringo is to my entire, like the way I perceive myself as a musician, as a person. Like Ringo is everything to me. And, I laugh about, I'm a drummer. I get into arguments about drummers, online, whatever, all the time. Like, this guy's great, this guy's overrated. Let's not even go there. But Ringo is, the object lessons of Ringo's are many and fertile, because what you have is a great musical person, not someone who is a virtuosic genius of like chops and blah blah blah, but someone who just was the right musician in the right band and knew musically what needed to be done. So Ringo is a constant fascination for me. It's so when he does what he does, it greases the wheels. It makes everything right. And you can hear in these weird arrangements, they're full of these, someone said to me the other day, hey, you should write like a history of prog rock drummers or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? There you go. Ringo Starr, first prog drummer. Mm-hmm. I got to say, Ringo would before Bill Bruford, before any of those Yes guys in the 70s, Ringo was having to deal with odd time signatures all the time. Listen to I Me Mine or Paul was, yeah, there's all these like weird gallopy little things. We're on our way home.
Yeah.
Bum, 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 we're on our way down. Bum, 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 we're going home. Those little odd six measures of two. That's not easy to do. And he always makes those sound like they're just, how could it be any other way?
Yeah, so natural.
So, yeah, unbelievable. So I'm absolutely well, and also you have these beats so shot so beautifully, and Jackson did such a great job of cleaning up the film stock, so you can see the detail, you can see the tape on his drums, you can see he's got a splash cymbal. Where did the splash cymbal come from? He's got a splash cymbal going, like all these things. So I was watching that kit to me and like seeing it in like Technicolor, and I loved it. I know they didn't like Twickenham, but in that studio with the red and the blue and the green on the walls,
beautiful,
and they're shot against that, and they're all dressed so colorfully. They're all these incredible colors and purples and greens, and shot against those beautiful. I know they didn't like it, but man, the shots they got in there are just transcendently.
They look so great. It's perfect.
It was great. Like 3 colored lights on the walls, a blue one, a red one, and a green one, or something. You're like, yeah. Oh my God!
What a great decision! What a great decision that would be timeless forever to have and be able to watch that over and over and still be beautiful.
Yeah, whoever set those 3 lights up, it should be getting an award or something.
Yeah. Well, let me roll out the last couple questions. You've been so generous, and I love picking your brain about that, Doc. I'm glad we could talk about that for sure. So like, what are your goals right now? What are your excitements? Is it the cover band? What are you working on?
Well, there's a couple of things. The cover band, by the way, let me go back and finish that story.
Please.
The cover band, it's called Bambikino, and Bambikino is a Hamburg era Beatles cover band. We only play the stuff they played in 60 through 62.
Right.
So we have about we know about 90, 100 songs.
Yeah.
And we play them when we play, which is very, very rare. We've only ever played maybe 20 shows in we've been together since 2010. We played in 2010, in 2009, I was in Germany with Mark and another band, and we were in Hamburg, and we realized that the first place the Beatles played in Hamburg was called the Indra. And the Indra is still a working bar club in Hamburg in the same location. And we're standing outside. It was a year before what would have been the 50th anniversary of their first show there. And we're standing outside the Indra, and we're going, the 50th anniversary is coming up. There should be a band playing in this room, all that stuff to mark this incredible. It was their first shows as the Beatles. It was, with Stuart Sutcliffe on bass and Pete Best on drums. And we thought we need to put a band together, and we went about putting it, and we put a band together with Doug and Eric, who I had just met in New York playing a Paul McCartney kind of show. And so we started playing in 2010, and we played very rarely because our whole thing is we do what we did there, and that is we go on at 7 or 8 o'clock, and we play for an hour, and we take a break, and we play for another hour, and we take a break, and we play for another hour and a half. We never do less than 3 sets.
Yeah.
We don't do a 40-minute opening for somebody. We don't play an hour and a half show. We play like 3-hour-long shows in a night. When we have to book a night from 7 to 1.
Right.
That's how we're able to play like 80 something songs during the course of a night. Harmony singing, girl group stuff. It's the greatest time. And I would do it I would take the show on the road. People would love it. It's like what seeing a band in 1961 was like. They were there the whole night. They entertained you all night long. And very minimal miking. We don't put microphones on the guitar amps. We don't mic the drums. Like an overhead and a bass drum mic.
Yeah.
So it's just really like you would have seen a band in 1960, just vocals really in the PA. So it's got a very raw kind of band sound. Anyway, it's one of my favorite things to do. And if I could do it more, if we didn't live all over the planet, we would do it a lot more, because you can't imagine a better time than 3 hours of like Beatles, like the Rosetta Stone of the Beatles catalog,
Right.
All the stuff that later became their music. So I'd like to do that more, and maybe we can work. I told the guys, like, we need to play a show this coming year. We haven't, obviously the last year and a half has been difficult. Doing what I'm doing now, and started during the pandemic, because I do have a rehearsal room back behind me. I live in Florida, and I'm lucky to have, number one, a little guest house back here by the pool.
Fantastic.
And but behind me, I installed a garden shed, like an 8 by 16 foot garden shed with a door and an air conditioner in it. And I put my drums in there thinking I just have a place to practice.
Yeah.
But it became a recording studio very quickly. And it sounds really good in there, though it's small. And I used like 3, maybe 4 microphones on the kit. And people send me their demos or songs. Like Ira put some stuff on there. And I've been doing it for Not a Surf too. We've been taking things back and forth. So it's really easy for me to sort of put drums on people's whatever. So I've been having a grand old time in there just playing and like learning. And I feel like that made me a better drummer. Like I got better during the pandemic in a way that I never really expected, because you can, it's one thing practicing and playing a lot. It's another thing playing and recording yourself, as you know, like when you record yourself and listen back, you really hear the best in the, like you hear all the stuff that bothers you really clearly. Like, oh, I sang that flat, or, oh, I played this, I laid, I was too lazy here. For a drummer, you really got to be on point. Every moment has got to work. It's all got to be relaxed, or whatever you're trying to get, like from the beginning to end, it's got to be really consistent and simple. And so it's teaching me to be a consistent, simple drummer and to keep a nice, consistent groove. I'm learning how to take stuff out, because that's the lesson of Ringo too. Like less is more. Mm-hmm. Like don't leave anything in there that's unnecessary. Try to take out all that, the fill doesn't need to be there. Let's take out some crash cymbals. I try to like take crash cymbals out. That's the things that drummers love that no one else likes. Crash cymbals, like overrated. But yeah, I try to take as many of those things out. Hi-hats, no one likes hi-hats, but drummers, like everyone's like, oh, those fizzing hi-hats, get them out of there. So I'm having a good time, like playing, like just doing these musical projects, mostly for just like friends of mine who send me their demos and stuff like that.
That is so heartening. That's really, really great. My wife gives me the same feedback. What happened to the song you were working on a few hours ago? What are all these extra tracks you put in here? I really liked it when I walked by you earlier. What did you do? Why'd you add so much? Well, you could ignore it, but I'll shoot you a track for the 2022 album that I'm working on. And if you are interested, I'll make a charitable donation anywhere you want, man. I would adore that, but I won't put any pressure on you. I'll just send it. Okay, no, and if you do something, man, that'd be huge. So my last question is, and you were just given some advice about simplicity, about, I love your lifelong learning mentality. Basically, you're still striving. You're still growing. Like, I'm amazed. Like I keep thinking, like, I've gotten there. I'm really good. I'm not gonna go. I got it. Here I am. I never practice. I'm very good at. Like I could stop. Like I kind of stopped for a while. I was really into buying like drum books. I'm gonna crack this drum book and learn these Buddy Rich fills. Yeah. And at some point, about a year or two ago, I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. Like I'm a self-taught drummer. Like the drum books are great. I'm not going to do this to myself anymore. I'm just going to keep playing. Yeah. And I can hear when I do stuff right. I'm definitely learning by doing and by listening back. And that's making me better. Like the books are not, they could help me. I'm not saying they can't. I'm just saying, like at this point in the game, like for me to sit there and crack a book is not where it's at. I can sit and play and get positive like reinforcement. I don't know. I'm still loving I still love the process of being a musician. Like never stops. Yeah. And even though I'm not living off of my music earnings, that I'm living off the feeling of making music. And I've known now over 15 years that the songs that I wrote, while not widely listened to, are really good. And it really makes me very proud of what's happened here and what I've done. And the more I listen to songs, and even if I work in 80, 90 hours a week now, my wife's we're expecting a second kid in April.
Oh, congratulations.
That this can never leave my life. This always has to be here. And it's my sanity and my joy.
It's fulfilling. People don't realize they're artistic. People maybe bury their artistic, selves. But yeah, if you have some sort of artistic, whatever it is, making, building, doing, creating, it's very, very, I don't know. It's so satisfying. It's so, for me, like it's baked into my personality. If I go too long without playing, I feel really weird. Like I feel like I'm atrophying.
Yes, there's a muscle not exercising. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're a long distance bike rider, you got to get on the bike every now and then. And, chop that way a little bit every day. A little bit.
Let me pedal my way to my final question. You've been very generous with your time here. We'll get on the road. My high school students, they're seniors. They'll be graduating in June. And I was talking to them yesterday about life advice. And some of what I was saying was keep a good head on your shoulders and good friends around you who are yes people and not crabs that keep you from escaping your situation and moving on. What would your advice be for my high school seniors who are about to go out into the adult life?
Oh my God, that's a rough question, because I don't know that I'm the high school seniors. I'm going to try to answer this really, because my tendency is to sort of joke around and like be a comedian about stuff like that. And
That's how I run my
but that's
class
a
as
real
well.
serious question. I went to an arts high school. I graduated an arts high school. I was really lucky to audition for and get into the High School of Performing Arts in New York City in the late '70s. And you remember that movie Fame? Yeah, that was my graduating, like this. That was shot in my senior year and released in my senior year. So I'm from an arts high school background, and so I was like kind of on a path already by the time. And that's the thing, maybe you don't realize that even though maybe it doesn't feel like you're on a path and you're just kind of floating around, you're already on a path whether you know it or not. And the things that you like in your life, the things that occupy your head, the things when you're not talking to your friends, all these things that you gravitate to, these were the things that are going to be the building blocks of your life. The mundane, stupid things, the selfish things, all those things are going to flower out over time into other things. These are the things that define who you are and what you're going to do. And they're going to shift. I feel like I was lucky in that I knew early on what I was about. I'm a drummer, and I stuck to the path. It was a lot of, I went through my 20s hand to mouth. It wasn't here's a little piece of advice that I should have taken for myself. I knew I was a music. I felt like I'm a drummer. I'm a musician. This is what I'm going to do come hell or high water, which is what I did. The one thing I should have done probably was have one alternate means of support, of financial support. Like financial independence is like a really important thing. When you talk about financial anything, like even my eyes still kind of roll back into my head. I'm a drummer. I don't like to talk about money and finances and numbers. They make me dizzy. I count to 4 and then I stop. But yeah, like I wish I had one other skill beside being a drummer where I could have like paid the rent a little easier through my 20s and 30s. I was lucky that, Not a Surf took off. I was really at that breaking point. I was already in my mid 30s when I joined Not a Surf and things started to take off. And I was at that point where like, for a musician, like once you're in your 30s, like you haven't really gotten anywhere. You're like, what do I do?
Familiar.
There's an existential fear that you have, but true or not, like you can keep making music forever and ever. And, and you never know when you hit, you can hit some sort of you never know. Like the world's it's a carnival. You never know when you're going to get the ring. It can happen anytime. And it doesn't happen like, the Beatles were 19, 20, 21 when they started. We can use them as a guide post for some things, but not necessarily all the time for all things. But yeah, I would, yeah, wow. It's a rangy question, because I was really lucky in that I knew what I was going to do early on and I followed it. So it's really hard for me to advise people. I feel like I was so lucky in that I found one thing, I stuck to it, and it ended up working out for me. But I feel like not everyone has the sheer, I don't know, luck, or I don't know. Maybe it was just luck, and maybe it was. I don't believe in providence, and I don't believe in. I don't believe in outside forces acting on your life. Like you determine everything. It's all you.
You make the choices. I've told them before that when you divert or fork off, it's because you've decided that path is closed to you, but no one else decides that for you. So if you're going to be unrelenting and willing to go in one direction, you don't ever take no or stop. I graduated high school in the recession and had to work 3 jobs part-time every day for 400 days in a row. And that limited my ability because I had to feed myself. But I told them I kept music, and Limelight came out last year, and I think it's the best song I've ever written. And so you hold on to what you can. And like you said, like there's opportunities to gig and play weddings, and who knows what comes later.
And that's what I'm doing now here in Florida. Listen, I've been a rock musician, touring rock band guy for like 25 years. I had some time here in Sarasota where I live. I'm bored. What do I do? And I ended up joining a local cover band. And every, couple of weeks we go to the barbecue joint out by the highway and we play like Doobie Brothers songs. And, it's corny and we're playing like Wagon Wheel songs that no one wants, songs that are so well loved, everyone hates them. And, and I got to say, the job is really the same for me as a musician as playing with Not a Surf in front of 3,000 people in a club.
Yeah.
The job remains the same. Like, there's a room full of people. I just want them to get up out of there, put down their sandwich, and get up out of the chair and that's a musician's job. It's like, it doesn't matter if you're playing in a bar mitzvah or you're playing in a rib joint or you're playing in the garden. The job remains the same. Like, you gotta have people who happen to be there in the room respond to you and like have a positive, like, yeah, this is all right. What is going on here? I don't know this, but this is really good. I've never seen these guys, but I'm digging this. Like, that's what you want. You have one chance to get people by the ear. You've got to use it, even if you're playing a Doobie Brothers song or whatever it is, imbue it with yourself.
I'm so glad I had the chance to have that moment with you years ago in Berkeley, and then moving on to San Francisco and following you on social and notasurf.com. You can find out all the upcoming dates in the coming year, link to the store, lovely merch, always something good to check out there. Thank you so much, man. Oh, yeah. Oh, how did this get here?
What? Wait a minute.
What a coincidence. I'm really grateful, man. Grateful for your music and really the stuff you did, the stuff you streamed from Daniel's house, the concerts. They kept me going through difficult years. I'm so thankful for you, man. Thank you so much.
We're not done yet.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm glad for that.
We're happy for a long, long time. That's why we're here.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Like, share, subscribe. Danny Hauger Music is available now. We'll see you next.